Hi, everyone. I'm the Reverend Dr. Jonipher Kuponu Kwong, Ministerial Credentialing Director. And I am just so pleased to have the Reverend Adam Dyer join us today to have a conversation around the formation process. Now, not gonna talk about all of it, but we are gonna bring you from the initial inquiry form up until you fill out the appointment form to see the Ministerial Fellowship Committee. Adam, why don't you introduce yourself before we continue?
Thank you, Jonipher. It's great to have a chance to share some information, and hopefully it's relatively correct and relatively current. Adam Lawrence Dyer, the minister at First Parish in Cambridge Unitarian Universalist in Harvard Square, Cambridge, Massachusetts. I've been in this position for the last 4 years. It was my first settlement. I was very lucky and blessed to be able to join this congregation. And I spent 5.5 years going through seminary. So I have a little bit of a different journey, and I'm very pleased to be able to share at least a little bit of that insight.
Today, we want to talk about the whys around each of these pieces of why are we requiring it from you. We have a couple of documents that I want to call attention to. The first is the requirements booklet, which can be found online, and that's a much wordier document. And so this does not replace that, and it does not replace the other document, which are the rules and policies of the Ministerial Fellowship Committee. And we also created a slide for you recently that you could also find online on the Becoming a Minister site. And that too, in graphic form, spells out some of the processes and ways that one could actually become a minister. So, the broad overall picture in terms of what the Ministerial Credentialing Office deals with is everyone from applicant, aspirant, candidate to when you see the Ministerial Fellowship Committee. And depending on how that goes, one could either enter preliminary fellowship or continue to stay a candidate. Now, the initial part of that process is becoming an applicant. And it literally is as easy as filling out the initial inquiry form. The only thing I want to encourage you to do, especially since the Unitarian Universalist Association is in the process of dismantling white supremacy culture and working towards a more inclusive and equitable faith, is to please fill out your demographic information. I know it's technically optional, but we do want to make a commitment to especially support those who have been historically marginalized. So if you identify as LGBTQ plus, or if you identify as Black, Indigenous, person of color, please do indicate that so we could keep track of you and ensure that you are being supported and nurtured in this process as much as possible. And then after you fill that out, you become an applicant. And there are several things that are required when you're an applicant in order to move on to become an aspirant. And one of them is to fill out an interview form. And I know, Adam, you've filled out a couple of these before. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about them?
This is an opportunity for you to actually really intentionally establish a relationship with a minister in your path. So I think rather than thinking about the form, think about the relationship that you're initiating by doing this form. And the form gets filled out based on a conversation that you'll have with a minister about your path, about your background, about where you see yourself possibly going. And so, yeah, it's been a lot of fun for me to have the opportunity to fill out this form, especially thinking back to my own experience of asking a minister to do that. And I'll say that is something that I think some people are sometimes a little intimidated by. It's like, oh wow, who can I ask to do this? Um, I found myself in a wonderful opportunity to be able to ask my home congregation at that time to be able to fill out this form, my minister there. And other people have asked me when I haven't been their home congregation minister, but someone who they wanted to have a relationship with throughout their process.
Great, thanks, Adam. And the other document is an acceptance to a theological school. Just to note that technically we only have two Unitarian Universalist identified schools or seminaries: Star King's School for the Ministry and Meadville Lombard Theological School. However, you may be interested to know that we have at least one seminarian in 46 seminaries across the country at this point. So, what that means is that the courses that are offered vary, and the level of support for our UU students also vary. Some have a more formalized liaison system, for example, to the denomination and to the seminary, and some do not have such a resource where you're going to have to figure out for yourself what courses are required in order for the MFC to recognize it. And the other thing that I would highly encourage you to do is to weave in the readings into your papers that you're being asked to write as much as possible. And when you do an independent studies course, for example, also try to weave in those readings. And so there's a lot of pros and cons to going to a UU identity school or not. I personally did not go to one. I went to Claremont School of Theology for both my MDiv and my DMin. And but nonetheless, there's a great opportunity for interfaith dialogue, for example, and that's exciting, right? As a pro, and the con is, unlike Star King and Meadville Lombard, where they try to weave in as much of the MFC process into their courses as much as possible, and of course UU history and polity, you may not necessarily get that if you don't go to a UU identity school. Adam, did you go to a UU identity school? And how's that?
Kind of and kind of not. Uh, Before I get into that, though, I think I would also tag on to what Jonipher you're saying about some of the plus, pluses and minuses. One of the major pluses I think that folks can get from going to one of the UU identified seminaries, Star King School for the Ministry or Meadville Lombard, is that the commitment to anti-racism and anti-oppression is built into the curriculum. It is a foundational part of both curricula, and that's really fantastic. Not to say that the other schools don't have it, but they're coming from that very strong UU place of that being an initial and a foundational commitment within how they're teaching and how they welcome students into the school. I started at Star King School for the Ministry, but I transferred to the Pacific School of Religion, which was literally right next door. And I transferred for a really specific reason, because I had some desire to be in a different kind of a relationship. Star King was great. I had a wonderful experience there with the faculty and staff. But I was looking for a more intentionally interfaith experience. My advisor ended up being Reverend Dr. Dorsey Blake and Odette Lockwood Stewart, Methodist and Congregational ministers, and it really taught me a lot. Now, in my position at First Parish in Cambridge, and as a chaplain at Harvard, I'm getting to see how wonderful that experience can be, and I'm getting to be a part of the support system for our UU students who are in a although it has, Harvard, massive UU roots, massive Unitarian roots, but I'm a part of the support system for the UU students. And watching them have this interfaith experience is very exciting. Also, here in Boston, we've got Boston University, which is a wonderful school that is attracting a lot more Unitarian Universalist students as well. So it's a rich experience having both in the seminary and then with the relationships that the schools have with other denominations is exciting. It's a great way to really flesh out your seminary career. So yeah, good stuff.
Great. Thanks for that additional information, Adam. And the next document is just a signed application form. declaring that you are interested in candidacy. Now, the only thing I want you to note is that part of this is the commitment and the agreement, I should say, that you will not take on a contract ministry for more than a year. So please make note of that when you're considering taking on a position, that we do want to make sure that you agree to that element of it. And then the other document that you are being asked to submit is a criminal background check. These days we have shifted and we use verified credentials, which may be familiar to some of you, especially those who are going to need the Lombard Theological School. Unfortunately, you can't just fill out one form and say one goes to MLTS and the other goes to the UUA, right? So you do need to fill out two forms, or at least ask them to submit a background check to both us and Meet the Lombard. Um, and we we don't at this point help subsidize for that. And the reason for that is that Oxford, which is the criminal background check that we used to use, costs $180 and we subsidize $90 for that. But verified credentials only charges us a little over $50. And so, however, if the cost is still an issue for you, please do let us know and we could work something out. And as soon as you fill that out and have them submit it to us, and we pick up on some anomalies, i.e., perhaps skeletons in your closet, then I'll probably contact you and we can have a conversation around what happened. And I do want to note that this probably won't be the last criminal background check you fill out, right? I'm seeing a nod here from Adam. When you apply for a settlement position, for example, you most likely will have to go through this process again. Another document that we require, or actually another part of this process, I should say, is sponsorship from a congregation. So Adam, can you tell us a little bit more about what that looks like?
I have most often gotten both the minister interview form and the congregational sponsorship form in the same breath, but they are separate and they are different and they do different things. I still go back to the relationship element of both. With congregational sponsorship, this is the congregation that's going to ideally, in a lovely and perfect world, ordain you. It's the congregation that is going to say, we believe in this person. We endorse this person into UU ministry, and this is an important part of our polity, because our congregations are the association. It's an association of congregations. There's no king sitting at the top of it. Jonipher, you're not the king of UUA. Um, but because our congregations hold all of the power, the sway, the authority, they are the ones who ordain ministers. They are the ones who help us find our ministers. And so this form is the congregation saying, yes, we believe in this person. We would like to see them head on this path. What's been really lovely to watch at First Parish in Cambridge is when someone comes along and they're interested in pursuing this path, we have a meeting with the board. We invite the potential candidate to a board meeting where they get to tell us their story, where they're going on their journey, what it means, and to start that real rich relationship. Then it becomes a matter of staying in touch, being in communication with the congregation, with the minister, and growing into that even more. I think it's one of the warmest parts of this whole process that can sometimes feel a little bit like filling out forms and people say jumping over hoops. But it is relational, and I encourage you to treat this particular part of it, the congregational sponsorship form, as a proof of that relationship.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Adam. I almost forgot about the distinction between credentialing and ordination, right? That technically we do call forth an individual from amongst us, and that usually means from within the congregation. And so this process only goes over the credentialing, the fellowshipping element, and the congregation is in charge of the actual ordination process. So there is a difference between the two. So thank you for lifting that up. And the other part that is optional at this point in terms of whether you're an aspirant is whether you're seeking plural or transfer from another faith tradition or another denomination. And what's to note about that is that there is an additional form required for that. And we may contact your judicatory head. That means your bishop or whatever other title folks may give that person, not king, like Adam mentioned before.
Oh man.
Just to make sure that everything is copacetic. Because, if you misbehave, for example, in one faith tradition, you're not necessarily going to get away with ours if that happens. So we just want to make sure that we're on the same page, that you're not leaving another denomination out of duress or out of some kind of problematic aspect with that other denomination. And I do want to have a couple more things to note about going through this process overall and what happens after you reach aspirant status. One of the things is scholarships, because we know how important it is to make sure that you make yourself as sustainable as possible going through this. And so, Adam, can you talk a little bit more about what the cost is these days of going through seminary and all about seminary debts and all that?
Yeah, a seminary is expensive.
Okay.
I won't lie. It is expensive. There are certainly ways to pay for it with loans. There are certainly different kinds of scholarships that are available. And also remember, there are scholarships available through specific institutions. I was very fortunate in my time both at Star King and Pacific School of Religion to receive several different scholarships, but I still had to take on debt just because of my life situation. And most people are graduating, I think, what is it, between $60,000 and $100,000 worth of debt if they are doing it through loans or those sorts of means. There are people who are in a position to, pay for it based on savings or saying, you know what, I'm actually going to sell my house, or there are lots of things that people have done to do seminary. So there are ways to do it. I think if there's anything I would say about it is that yes, it is expensive, but yes, there are ways to do it. There are increasing number of there's a lot of conversation, I should say, about the debt cancellation that may emerge over the next few years with the current presidential administration. And crossing our fingers, I think that would be a great thing. And that's based on working for what is essentially a nonprofit. They're looking at reducing the number of years from 10 to 5 years, which is exciting because that would erase a bunch of the debt for a whole lot of people and make us all solvent. So expensive, but it is doable. There is a way.
Thanks. And again, a gentle reminder that if you are applying for scholarships, the deadline is April 15th. So just remember, the day your taxes are due is also when the applications are due for a scholarship with us. And we're trying to streamline this process as much as possible so that you only have to fill out one form. But if you're a first-year seminarian, for example, you may need to fill out another one. And check with your seminary, because different seminaries have different scholarship application processes and forms that you need to fill out. And what I could say is that our two seminaries, Star King and Meadville, are making a commitment to, again, help support people who have been historically marginalized, particularly Black, Indigenous, people of color. And so there may be special scholarships available for you. And the other benefit of becoming an aspirant is that you could actually join the UU Ministers Association's Ministerial Formation Network. So as soon as you achieve aspirant status, we forward your name over to the UUMA, and they give you the option of either being assigned a vocational advisor and you could meet with that person one-on-one, or being part of a group vocational advisement. And this group advisement setting could, again, include people with similar identities as you. So it could be an all trans group, for example, or an all BIPOC group. So the UUMA would be happy to connect you with a discernment group that would make sense for you. Again, the whole goal of this is to help you continue to refine your call to ministry and to continue to develop you during your formation process.
I just wanted to jump in on one quick thing because you
Yeah,
reminded me of something really important that I found has been essential to my, I'll call it success, whatever, in being on this journey, is the UUMA, the Unitarian Universalist Ministers Association.
yep,
That developing a relationship with the Unitarian Universalist Ministers Association early on in this process sort of puts you on the on ramp to develop these really powerful collegial relationships that will become absolutely crucial. They're ministers are the ones you can talk to about ministry. They're the ones who can support you, who know what you're going through. So developing that relationship with the MFM through the Ministerial Unitarian Universalist Ministers Association, just really beautiful, among other things. Thank you.
yeah. And you could join a local chapter right after you become an aspirant, and you could vote
Mhm.
on this during business meetings and all that good stuff. And you're absolutely right, Adam. In my previous experience as congregational life staff, I found that the ministers who got in trouble, usually were the ones that isolated themselves and, who were afraid to reach out until it's too late. So having that strong collegial bond and relationship sooner rather than later does indeed help to serve the health and vitality of one's ministry. So the last thing I want to know before we move on to the next status, which is candidate status, is that aspirant status has a 7-year shelf life, so to speak, right? So make sure that you're mindful of that as you're going through this process. And the candidate status also has a 7-year shelf life before you see the MFC. So if that shelf life expires, then we're going to ask you to write a letter and make a special request to see the MFC and explain to them why it's going to take you more than 7 years to do that. We recognize that each of us takes a different amount of time to fully mature and develop our call. And yet I feel like 14 years is a good long time to do that in. That's over a decade, right?
The other component we may ask you to retake after 7 years is a career assessment. Now, I know that some of you may have some concerns about the career assessment. We want you to know that the MSC is engaged with the Ministry Development Centers to help ensure that the career assessment provides a positive experience that meets our needs for helpful information while respecting and honoring the diverse identities of our Unitarian Universalist candidates.
We don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, and we do realize that there are certain useful elements to the career assessment. And we want you to know that that's only one element out of the entire packet that we take a look at. So we do take it seriously, but it's not the entirety, and it doesn't give us the entire picture of who you are. So we just want to make note of that and make sure that you're aware that we are working on it, and that if you do run across any issues, please, please, please give me a call so that I too could relay that information on to the ministry development centers. The other thing that's required in order for you to move on from candidate status is a year of theological education. And what I could tell you is that at this point, we have received the recommendations from the Commission on Institutional Change. And as Adam mentioned, an MDiv degree, a seminary degree, can be costly. Is there a way for us to widen the path so that there could be other creative forms of education that are more experiential? So we are exploring what it means to go through an apprenticeship program, for example, like other denominations are doing right now. But at this point, that has not yet been fully fleshed out, and it certainly hasn't been approved by the board yet. And so we're at the very, very early stages of exploring what that might look like. But Adam, perhaps you could give us, your experience with your theological education, and can you talk a little bit more about the value of getting an MDiv degree?
Absolutely. And I will start with a little bit of a disclaimer. I am not endorsing transferring schools. That is not my intent here. Again, I did so for really specific reasons because I had a specific set of goals that I realized I could achieve in a different school. So really, I'll just focus on Pacific School of Religion, where I received my MDiv. And what became apparent to me in what I was looking for in a seminary education was expansiveness. I was looking for my experience to be as expansive as the ministry that I was eager to pursue. And I wanted some really, really solid grounding in theological writing. And I was able to get all of that from what I wanted. So it was this question of being able to ask myself what I wanted, where I wanted to take my education, but then also being able to understand what the school would invite me into. How far was the school going to push me? And I think that was the wonderful surprise and benefit to being at the Pacific School of Religion was that I was taking New Testament and Pauline scriptures with Jesuit priests, and that was that was pretty intense, I have to admit, and eye-opening and heart-opening as well. And I think that's something that most people aren't always ready for when they get to seminary, is that it's not just an academic program, it is a life program. You're learning a new posture of how you will navigate the world if you're headed, particularly if you're headed into parish ministry or chaplaincy or any kind of ministry where you're saying, I am a person of faith and I'm going to be an ambassador for what this faith represents, whether that's in academia, whether that's in the parish, whether that's in corporate life, whatever. But you're going to transform, you're going to change, and you want to have an environment that's going to invite the kind of change that you're looking for, and also maybe invite you into some changes that you weren't expecting. So yeah, I say, be open to what the different seminary experiences can bring, and discerning at the same time. And let me just say one quick word though about one quick mention about the word discernment. It is something you will do from before starting your application well into your settled ministry and full fellowship. Discernment is an ongoing process. This questioning, what am I doing? How am I doing it? Why am I doing it? And what is feeding me? What is feeding the communities that I'm working with? So you learn how to discern. That's what it is. Learn how to discern. Maybe that could be a slogan.
I love it, and amen to that. I too had a really good seminary experience, and won't go over it right now because we have other issues to cover, like CPE, for example. What was that like for you?
Who, me? No,
Yeah.
who else is on this with you? So CPE was very interesting. There, the different seminaries will have different thoughts on where CPE should fall in your growth in your program. Some want it early on. Some are like, yeah, we don't care. You will through your advisors at school in conversation with Jonipher. Again, I'll advocate for getting to know his phone number. Sorry, you're going to get a bunch of calls. You'll figure out what's going to work best for you, where it's going to work best for you, what's going to work financially as well. But really, the value of CPE is that it is real time, it is live, it is all cylinders firing. You are doing ministry. If you're doing it in a hospital setting, it can be intense. And it is important to give CPE the space it needs. Um, I would not, this is just my personal recommendation, that any way that you can avoid doing CPE and something else at the same time, avoid that. CPE is in the hospital setting at least is where you are doing hospital chaplaincy. You will deal with and be presented with death. You will be presented with crises. You will be presented with emotional meltdowns, yours and other people's. And it is ministry, and it matters. It's real time. It's real world. Outside of the hospital setting, it may be a palliative care setting, it could be a hospice setting, it could be a nursing home setting. But again, it's real time ministry. And so having that opportunity to do CPE, it is more so even than the internship. It's the opportunity where you are no longer with the training wheels on.
Mm.
If you're riding along, you're like, okay, I don't have training wheels. Oh, I'm gonna fall over, and you fall over, and you have the opportunity in CPE to get back up. CPE supervisors are often beautifully trained. Um, they create these environments, the opportunities for you to go over your different verbatims and the process of reflecting on the different sessions you have with people, but you're in community with other people who are in that CPE. And that becomes the safe landing ground for when you fall off the bike. And they help you get back up, and you get back on, and you go back into the next hospital room, the next patient room, or whatever. It's a really important part of the formation for anyone going into ministry. And even if you're not going into the parish, I encourage folks to go to CPE. Last thing I'll say is I had every intention of trying to figure out a way to skip CPE. I had a lot of experience through my internship with a lot of grief, a lot of death, a lot of really challenging situations. I was very grateful for having a wonderful internship supervisor who helped me through all of that. And I thought, I'm good to go. And I was encouraged to still do CPE. I got to CPE, and it was totally different. It gave me a whole other set of tools to put in my toolkit. And I'm grateful for it. I use those tools every single day.
You did it after your internship, right?
Yes.
Does it
so
matter then what order you do it? Wait,
so
what do you recommend?
yeah, I think this will get into a little bit of the MFC thing. My seminary didn't have a requirement for when you did CPE. Um, and I had already secured my internship. So I did my internship with the intention of trying to do my CPE as soon as possible after that. But life added up in such a way that I wasn't able to. But because I had done my internship, I was able to get an MFC appointment, which kept me on track, kept me moving. But it meant that after I saw the MFC and that I was in search, I had to be like, I got to do CPE because I can't be in the parish without doing CPE. So the very last thing I did was CPE. I did it the summer before I started at First Parish in Cambridge. I was very grateful to the search committee. They're like, we get it, life happens. And I did it that way, did an intensive over the summer.
That's great. So it is important to note that you don't necessarily have to do it in any specific order unless your seminary requires it, like you were hinting at. And we just need one final evaluation from either a field ed or a CPE or an internship. So let's talk a little bit more about an internship, shall we? Again, can you tell us the value? Why need to do an internship? And did you do yours full time, part time? What are the hourly requirements for each? And
Internship. So there are a few different um, mutations of internships. There's what I did, which was full time. It was 10 months. I moved to San Diego. That's where I did my internship and did it there. It was an amazing and intense experience.
well,
Other
if you're here for
internships.
10 months, technically the requirement is only 9 months, right?
It had to do with the church year and the way the way their internship added up, and has more to do with the history of San Diego's internship than anything else.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it filled the requirement of 9 months, and other internships will be part-time 2 year. In fact, the First Parish in Cambridge has historically had a part-time 2 year internship, and has also historically really only attracted students from Harvard Divinity School. That has more to do with the living situation and the expense of having someone move to Cambridge. But that's a big reality of the internship experience. It's like, are you willing to move? If you're someone who has been working, if you're, as I was, second or third even career, and you've got a family, moving to another part of the country may not be something that feels very good to do. And it also may be something that you find you want to do for the kind of ministry you'd like to pursue. It is a complex set of choices that need to be made around internship. But to the value of the internship, again, like the CPE, it's real-time learning. It is real-time ministry. This then becomes really important in terms of, again, our congregational polity. You're having the opportunity in the internship in a congregational setting, parish setting, to experience the dynamics of working directly with the congregation, of not just leading worship, but leading discussion groups, committees, serving, doing social justice with them in the community, getting to know the community. And also you get to have this awesome experience of working closely with a minister who will be your internship supervisor. And there's someone who is seasoned. There's someone who is fully fellowshipped and can show you the ropes. They get to not so much infuse you with their sensibilities, but help bring out your personal uh, style, your way, and also tell you when, yeah, that's not working. And that's what the relationship is really about. So you get to try it on. You get to try on what it is to actually be a minister in the parish setting. There are internships that are outside of the parish setting. Of course, there's some that are that folks are developing and creating in nonprofit organizations and other religiously based organizations and non-religiously based organizations. And what's important in that process is to really deeply understand the commitment you're making to the kind of education you want. You will have specific goals. You will have a supervisor you can reflect with. You'll have all of these things that have to be done as part of the internship for it to be real and valid, that are part of your growth and part of you being able to document where you're headed with your work. And I think that's the most important thing. I was able to, from my internship, really understand what my path was about. And I did. All honesty, straight up, I was questioning whether I should ever go into the parish. Um, and that was because I was like, am I strong enough? Am I the right person to be in the parish? Ultimately, I decided I was the right person to be in a parish. But it was really interesting to come out of that experience and ask myself, maybe I need to think about other options as well. I would not have done that would not have had that opportunity had I not had such a really strong and powerful internship experience.
And yeah, so you brought up a good point that it does not need to be in a parish setting. And as a matter of fact, you could use your CPE residency as your internship equivalent. And however, if you have any questions, again, feel free to run it by me first, especially if you have a very unique kind of situation that you may have a question about whether or not it meets the internship requirement. And we have a whole separate manual called the Internship Manual, where you can find all the details that Adam was talking about in terms of what qualifies as a supervisor, and again, how many hours you need, and the internship salary guidelines, all that good stuff can be found there. I do want to emphasize that we, generally speaking, do not recommend that you do your internship. In fact, it's a violation of the MFC's rules and policies in your home congregation. And the major reason behind that is that we have this saying, or at least my predecessor had this saying, you've been to one UU congregation, you've been to one UU congregation. It's not like we all have a book of common worship or common prayer or anything like that, right? So the experience is a little different, and not to mention the size of a congregation makes a difference as well. And so we want you to experience the gamut of the 1,000 Unitarian Universalist congregations that we have out there. Well, maybe not all 1,000, but at least a few, so that your perspective isn't limited to just one congregation. So in my mind, the whole benefit of an internship experience is that A, you're doing ministry in a different context and hopefully a different location. And B, that you're going to have a different role to play. And when you're a member of a congregation and you grew up there, people are going to say, oh, that's just so and so. We've been fellow lay members for the longest time. What do you mean that all of a sudden they have this new role as an intern minister? There is a difference in covenant, whether you're being pastored to and ministered to, or whether you're being pastored of. And when you're the minister of a congregation, you're practicing pastoral care to others. And so there is a different relationship and a different covenant there. And again, as Adam mentioned, with the full-time or part-time thing, no matter what you decide to do, you're there for a specific time period. So you come in and then you go back out, and then another person comes in and out, and you have this transition and the passing of the baton between interns. So we want to make sure that those lines are clear as well. And to that end, we don't, in fact, we don't allow for people to serve in a religious professional capacity until at least after 3 years of when you leave that internship site. So we call this the 3-year rule. After you do all of that, right, your CPE, internship, and so on and so forth, but before requesting an appointment with the MFC, you need to, again, have completed either a CPE unit or an internship and pay $250 and fill out an MFC appointment form. Now, there's a lot of anxiety out there because back in the past, you needed to have scheduled this 2 years ahead of time because we had a backlog. Now we've added an extra panel. So whereas in the past we had 2 panels that interviewed 10 candidates each, we now have 3 panels that interview 7 candidates each. So if you do the math, that's still about 21 folks that we're seeing. But again, these days we have pretty much caught up, and we are not scheduling that far out. In fact, I would say that if you want to see the MSc within a year, chances are you could probably do that. I'll edit this video if that is no longer the case. But at this point, what I'm telling you is fairly accurate. And I do want to talk about a couple more things because I know that some of you are concerned about how to put together your packet and you want to make sure that it's as complete as possible and that there's no red flags that the MFC might ask you questions around. And I know that my predecessor used to read every single packet and made that as an offer. Unfortunately, because I'm so new to this job and I have limited capacity in terms of my time, I'm no longer reviewing packets. But here's what I would recommend. This is exactly what your vocational advisor is there to help you do, to help provide an extra set of lens to your packet. And there are professional groups that do this for a living and professional folks that do this for a living. Now, unfortunately, they didn't pay me enough money to advertise or to help market and promote them. So I'm not going to mention any names, but maybe if you Google it, or maybe if you ask other your fellow seminarians or whatever, they may tell you who all does this for a living. But there are folks who do that. And the other thing I want to mention, because you may be asking at this point, well, I have a special situation. I'm a military chaplain, for example, and I need ecclesiastical endorsement. Who do I go to for that? So your person would be the Reverend Sarah Lammert. So email her at slammert, LAMMERT at UUA.org. And she would be, I'm sure, more than happy to go over what the special requirements are from the Department of Defense to be a military chaplain. And those of you who are coming at this from outside the United States or Canada may have other questions as well. And your primary person would be the Reverend Alicia Ford. So that's AFORDE at UUA.org is Alicia's email address. And you could get more information around how to get credentialed that way. Bottom line is, as Adam mentioned, I am happy to talk to you. Just schedule something on my Calendly. It's fairly easy to do, actually. And happy to Zoom with you, happy to communicate via email with you, jkwong, jkwong at uua.org. And let's talk. I'm sure, we could figure something out.
I think the only thing I would add is just to remember that this process belongs to you. This is not about checking boxes. It's not about filling out forms. It's not about jumping over hoops. This is about how you want to enter into ministry. So you get to own it. You get to drive it. Yes, there are requirements along the way, but it is your process. And yeah, let it be yours. Let it be shaped like you. Let it look like you. Let it sound like you. Let it be you.
Words of wisdom to live by. And that is why I also tell people my other title is really just discernment partner. So I'm here to journey with you as you're trying to figure out whether really Unitarian Universalist ministry is where your calling is. And that's what the MFC is looking for as well. Is there a UU minister in the room? I wish you blessings. And Adam, thank you again for spending this time with us and sharing from your own personal experiences on
Absolutely, my pleasure.
For you.
Thank you.
Thank you all for listening. We'll see you soon.